Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life. Please take a moment to like and subscribe, it really helps.
Today, we're plunging into a topic that feels increasingly central to our daily lives. We're talking about the evolving landscape of technology, truth, and, well, societal control. We've got a really unique stack of sources for this deep dive: articles, research, some fascinating personal accounts. And our mission, like always, is to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights, basically giving you a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed on this pretty crucial subject.
Exactly. And our conversation today is going to synthesize these experiences, look at some historical parallels, current events, to really expose what one person who's deep in this world calls a pervasive and accelerating dystopia. It's this reality driven by advanced tech and, maybe the most unsettling part, a deliberate erosion of truth itself.
So get ready. It's a journey that might surprise you, definitely make you think. And hopefully we can keep it conversational enough, keep you hooked on what's really a critical conversation for all of us. Let's unpack this. So our deep dive starts with this idea of truth eroding, getting into what sources call the post-reality world. And this really clicks into place with a personal story from the subject of our deep dive, Shane Cashman. He traces his skepticism about the media way, way back to the Columbine shooting.
Yeah, it's a powerful starting point for his distrust, isn't it? Cashman remembers really clearly how Marilyn Manson, an artist he actually listened to, was just painted by the news as a devil. Just ruthlessly attacked, misrepresented. He felt the media was, showing him in a totally different light than the artist he knew.
Right.
And that early experience, it basically taught him, okay, don't just blindly trust the narratives you see in the mainstream media.
That initial seed of distrust really sets the tone. And the sources point out how this dynamic, this idea that once accused, you can never win, it just gets amplified, right?
Right.
In the digital world, the court of public opinion. What else do the materials say about how that immediate judgment plays out?
Oh, that amplification is huge. The internet has, unfortunately, just made it worse. It enables what Cashman calls post-reality. Confirmation bias just runs wild. People can easily find stuff that confirms whatever they already believe, no matter how, out there it is. We saw it big time during COVID, didn't we? Where, like the source says, everyone had their own facts that they truly believe and would fight tooth and nail for.
Yeah.
It led to this really fragmented sense of reality, just shattered.
And the key insight here, I think, is how this erosion of truth has shifted. It's not just misinformation anymore. It's become a deliberate engineering of reality. We're talking powerful companies literally creating reality and suppressing reality. That's a direct quote. And now, with AI, deepfakes, it allows for what the sources are calling a designer reality. People can straight up make up realities altogether. It's not just filtering info, it's manufacturing it. So think about it. How often do you find yourself questioning what's real online? Or even what your friends believe based on what they've seen?
And this whole dive into the post-reality world,
Yeah.
it naturally leads us to the architects,
Right.
the ones engineering this truth, those trying to control not just information but society. So the sources get into this concept called technocracy, which surprisingly isn't a new idea. It actually started back in the 1920s, 30s. It was this proposed system where experts and engineers would run things, supposedly more efficient than democracy, especially during the Great Depression. And the argument now is that this vision is kind of happening through the combined interests of tech billionaires and government.
And the journey then takes this really interesting detour, connecting that early technocracy idea to people we know now, some surprising family links. The material points out that Elon Musk's own grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, was actually a key figure in that early movement.
Right.
A well-known chiropractor, apparently totally obsessed with the idea, even tried to get a technocratic government going in Canada.
It's a fascinating historical thread the sources pull on. Haldeman was also really fixated on finding the mythical lost city of Kalahari in South Africa, this quest for some hidden knowledge or power. And Cashman draws this direct line from that obsession to Elon Musk's goals today, suggesting that Mars is Elon's lost city of Kalahari.
Wow.
It sort of reflects this deep-seated, maybe even generational drive for a new engineered society, a perfect controlled world.
So if we bring that history forward to today, it seems pretty clear that, as the sources put it, the military-industrial complex is the tech-industrial complex. You see it with examples like Palantir, funded early on by In-Q-Tel, which is basically a CIA venture capital firm, right? Investing in tech for intelligence.
Exactly. It shows that deep integration, state security, private tech, hand in glove.
The sources even mentioned Google's past work with surveillance satellites before they reportedly backed away.
Which leads us to this really chilling concept the sources explore. Data harvesting, turning into what they call brain surveillance.
Yeah.
Facebook, for instance, accused of secretly targeting vulnerable people. The example given is 17 to 18-year-old girls who delete selfies.
Oh, wow.
That data, seemingly harmless, gets sent to advertisers. Why? Because the thinking is, when you're sad, you're more willing to buy something. Calculated, predatory almost, exploiting emotions for profit.
And imagine this, the near future, where tech can literally read your brain, translate your brainwave into images, words, which leads to this terrifying idea of predictive policing within your brain. Not just predicting actions, but thoughts.
It sounds like sci-fi, but
It's not just theory, is it? It's hinted at by tools like the Lavender AI model, reportedly used by the Israeli military. Identified, 37,000 potential targets?
with a significant error rate, apparently.
Which just shows the alarming power and the massive risks when AI gets tasked with these life or death decisions. It blurs accountability, consequence, everything.
And this terrifying picture, brain surveillance, predictive control, it brings us back to the tool itself, AI. And it's fascinating how figures like Elon Musk have completely rebranded it. He used to talk about AI like summoning the demon. Remember that?
I do, yeah.
Now it's framed as a digital god. But the sources warn this language shift hides the reality that AI will increasingly replace jobs, and that the future technocracy is probably going to install AI as its ultimate objective expert. And this isn't theoretical. The Russian military apparently has used AI to mimic the voices of family members of Ukrainian soldiers
No way.
to try and convince them to surrender. It shows the real manipulative power it already has.
It's a stark picture, isn't it? Just imagine a world where your thoughts could be monitored. How much privacy are we actually willing to give up for efficiency, or what feels like safety?
And as we keep digging here, we really have to ask about the price of all this progress, especially when innovation meets unchecked power. The sources talk about the monopolization of collective consciousness, pointing straight at Elon Musk buying Twitter, now X. He's essentially using it to feed data into his AI projects, Grok, Optimus, literally data harvesting our thoughts, monopolizing our brains.
So control over the platform means...
Control over thought processes.
Yeah.
Our shared reality, that's the insight.
And this is where it gets, I think, particularly unsettling. This monopolizing of consciousness leads right into transhumanism, designer immortality, through things like Neuralink. But the worry isn't just the tech itself, it's the societal pressure.
Right.
The sources suggest that participating in society in the future might actually require this kind of augmentation. Think about it. Imagine being the only one who can't communicate telepathically when everyone else can.
Yeah.
It's like being the only one without a smartphone today, but way, way bigger implications for just belonging, for access.
And this ambition, it's not just digital or inside our heads. We're seeing actual private cities being built. Tech billionaires like Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn, Mark Andreessen from Substack in California.
Right. I read about that.
And the sources say in some of these places, they're installing Tesla keys in their hands, creating this biohacker type of universe. They're described as small versions of their technocracy, controlled environments for the chosen few.
And some are aiming even higher, right? Like Peter Thiel pursuing floating cities.
Exactly, floating cities. And these projects, plus stories of lawsuits against farmers who won't sell their land, it creates this really clear physical divide. You're either going to be a part of it or not, a binary choice.
It all seems to come back to this relentless push for efficiency, doesn't it? But that has echoes, like Frederick Taylorism from the early 20th century, treating people like replaceable parts.
Which had no negative consequences for people's well-being, their autonomy.
And the sources warn about a potential Maoist-style great leap forward, citing how Mao, even though he thought he and his people were experts at rebuilding society, led a catastrophic famine. It's a stark reminder, isn't it? When supposed expertise meets unchecked power and ignores the human cost.
So when innovation gets paired with that kind of power, are we really progressing? Or are we losing something fundamental about being human? It's a critical question, really.
And looking at the cultural fallout from all this, the sources point to a sharp rise in mental illness, isolation. They use this striking analogy. Humans living under artificial light, glued to screens. We're like orcas at SeaWorld who go crazy in captivity.
That's a powerful image.
It really paints a picture of how this engineered environment might be messing with our collective sanity, our sense of what's real.
And there's also this tangible loss of just organic experience.
Yeah.
Cashman shares these little anecdotes like talking to a human toll booth operator versus the automated Easy Pass.
Yeah.
Just observing how those simple, real connections are vanishing. He also complains about the shift in journalism, from being on the ground to what he calls, graphically, a human centipede of information reporting,
Oof.
where stories just get rehashed endlessly with no direct experience, no real insight.
And this isolation, it fuels extreme political fragmentation. The sources describe this landscape where everybody suspects everybody of being a Fed,
Right, that paranoia.
leading to a willingness to violence, not a traditional civil war, but maybe a fragmented one.
The sources bring up historical parallels here, like Italy's years of lead, that period of intense political terrorism unrest.
Or even Operation Northwoods in the U.S., that declassified plan for false flag attacks to justify military action.
And even points out how domestic terrorists, like the Weather Underground, eventually became professors.
It just shows how bleary historical narratives can get, how identities shift.
Which raises a huge question. How do you trust institutions? When, as the sources suggest, you had doctors who lost their minds pushing certain narratives.
Like the example of a doctor suggesting a COVID shot for stress relief.
Exactly. Or universities being described as ideological death camps where independent thought gets shut down. It points to this deep, maybe systemic corruption in the pillars of society.
But despite all that, the sources stress the importance of personal resistance and skepticism.
Yeah.
You even have to be skeptical of your skepticism, right? To avoid falling into new traps.
That's a good point.
And this deep dive highlights the power of art, using Marilyn Manson's art as his greatest weapon against the attacks on him. And it underlines the value of free speech, not just to express ideas, but to really understand even bad ideas so you can effectively counter them.
And ultimately, for Cashman, the subject here, his personal path led to Christianity, finding a moral anchor, a foundation for his kids in what he saw as a depraved world. He felt the moral structure of society was disintegrating. So faith became his shield, his value system in a deliberately confused world.
So in a world that feels increasingly engineered adrift, how do we find our own anchors? How do we figure out the true paths forward for ourselves and together?
So to kind of wrap up our deep dive today, what we've really uncovered is this overarching story, an almost invisible war on our reality, on our minds. And it's driven by this deeply rooted bureaucratic state that's evolved. It's now pretty clearly the tech-industrial complex, wielding this unprecedented power over information, over perception.
Okay, so if the dystopia we're talking about isn't some future city with flying cars and robots, but it's an inward thing already here, a war on privacy, thoughts, our ability to know what's true, what daily practices can you, listening right now, adopt to build a stronger shield against this erosion without, becoming totally paranoid or disconnected? Something to think about.
If you enjoyed this episode of While We Were Distracted, be sure to watch the video that inspired it.